saying that we give to each other often, and it's said very lightly, but we say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And we say it kind of tongue-in-cheek, but what that does is that helps us acknowledge the times when there's a possibility of fear coming up, and we simply acknowledge it and let it go. Don't be afraid. And we say it so much that we really don't give each other much space to be afraid. Because so many times we waste a lot of time being afraid. We get afraid of such little things. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to find a parking space. I'm afraid. Oh gee, I got a little crick in my back. Well, let me see, I was up on a ladder, twisted around, trying to lock some little lock nuts on a run for my dog since she found the road last week. Don't be afraid. And when we got down off the ladder, it was like, oh, no, don't be afraid. It's a normal, logical response to having been up on a ladder twisted around like this for a long period of time. Don't be afraid. We waste so much time being afraid when we don't need to be afraid of the little things. Because sooner or later, there'll be something that really calls to us to be afraid. And at that moment, I say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Some people live their entire lives afraid. They're afraid of their shadow. They're afraid to try anything new. They're afraid to venture out into the world. They're afraid to leave a relationship that should have been left long ago. They're afraid to let go of a job that they should have let go of long ago. They're afraid to move to Asheville, North Carolina. They live their lives in fear. And I don't know about you, but I am not going to spend this life to where I end up at the end of it with regret. I'm not going to do that. It's too much trouble to live. If we're going to spend the time and energy in being alive, we might as well live our life. And we might as well live it richly and fully. And that's one thing that I love about this teaching. It calls you, the Army got it first, it calls you to be all that you can be. It calls you to be who you've come here to be. It calls you to open up to your magnificence and not to play a small game and be afraid. And so today is Palm Sunday. And I was thinking about this because people put all of this big hoopla on Jesus, and then they figured that he was totally caught off guard by the whole crucifixion thing. It just doesn't make any sense to me. He can cause the blind to see, he can cause the lame to walk, he can heal the sick, he can transform the little lunchbox of this kid to feed the multitudes, but he didn't know what was coming. Doesn't make any sense to me. He says, the Father and I are one, but God kept a secret from me. I don't think so. And so I was doing a little research on this, and what I noticed was that he spent that 40 days and 40 nights in the desert really contemplating what was coming up for him 3 years prior to going into Jerusalem. He did it right after he got baptized by John the Baptist when he realized he had gone into ministry. And I think anyone going into ministry should spend 40 days and 40 nights in the desert thinking about whether or not they really want to do it. Because I think he knew the whole picture all the way through. And yet when the time came, he held his head up. He got up on a donkey, or an ass, depending on what version you read, and he rode in to the city of Jerusalem. Now, I think that there was a part of him that was maybe a little nervous, but that he triumphed over. He transcended is actually a better word than triumph, because triumph has a kind of a conflict to it, and transcendence doesn't. And I wonder if there's not something in our lives that we too will be called upon to ride into. And you know, it may look like there's singing of Hosanna and palm fronds being laid down. It's like, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you, you're the one, I just want to do this with you. This is the best business deal in the world, or you've got to buy this house, whatever it may sound like. There's a lot of singing and a lot of celebrating, but then there's something that follows that. And people say, oh, this was this terrible thing that happened. I don't think so. I think that in each of our lives we are called upon to let go of who we thought we were. I think in each of our lives there comes a time when we have to die to the old, to be risen in consciousness to the new. And at that point, the question that comes up for me is, first of all, am I going to do it? And am I going to let my fear get in the way? How many times have we been called upon to let go of who we thought we were? Think about who you were 10 years ago. You were a different person. How about 20 years ago? How about 30 years ago? You were a different person. Some of you were not born in this lifetime yet. You were out floating around with the light and the love, however that looked. But you were different. And every time you have made growth, spiritual growth in your life, you've had to let go of that which was the old. And in doing that, there can be some fear. Gosh, some people are afraid to let go of their cars. I may never find a car this good again. I know I've got to put a new engine in it. I've got to get it repainted. And I've just got another dent. But I may never find a car like this again. Let it go. Let it go. Oh, I can't quit this job. It's making me sick. I can't stand it. Can't stand the people I work with. But, you know, if I quit this job, I may end up as a bag lady. Let it go. Anytime, because if you don't, it's going to be taken from you simply by an outpicturing of your consciousness. Anybody who comes to see me and they say, oh, I was fired, I say, great. You obviously were ready to leave it. Because that which is yours cannot be taken from you, and that which is not yours, you cannot keep. Oh, they left me. Good. Good. You do not want to be with anybody who does not want to be with you. Yeah. Let it go. Don't be afraid. There's something that is calling you to be greater than you ever have been in this life. There's something that's calling you to rise up into a greater level of consciousness. Don't be afraid. Put your happy face on. Climb up on your ass. Ride into the city. And whatever it is, know that there is that which is greater than circumstances that guides your life. There is that presence and power within you that directs your course. It's not outside of you. It's inside of you. Don't be afraid. I often chuckle at traditional Christianity and how they are so selective in what they teach about the sayings of Jesus, and how oftentimes that is twisted to create a sense of separation for someone who taught oneness. I mean, it's tricky to take someone who was teaching oneness. These things then greater ye shall do also. Know ye not that ye are gods? How long must I suffer you? Say to that mountain, move, and it will move if you have the faith of a grain of mustard seed. It's not me who's doing this. It's the Father within that doeth the work. And if you're looking for heaven, it's not outside of you, it's not up, it's not down, it's inside of you. The kingdom of heaven is within. All he talked about was oneness. And yet you can twist that into whoever he was the great exception. He is the only one, and none of those things will ever happen again. Isn't that bizarre? Jesus was all about healing. And yet all of that healing doesn't happen anymore. Why? He said, do this. Do this. If you see a problem, just fix it. Just change it. It's no big deal. You need money, go fish it, pull a coin out of a fish. You want some wine? Take some water, turn it into wine, have a party. It's not judgmental. You who are without sin, cast the first stone. Saints, get off your judgmental high horse. We're all the same here. He was saying all you have to do is open up to that presence inside of you, and your outer circumstances will change. So I chuckle sometimes at how traditional religions have succeeded in taking this incredible way shower and turned it into the traditional victim, rescuer, perpetrator triangle, where we're the victims, Jesus is the rescuer, and the perpetrator varies between God and the devil. Take your choice. And the teachings were that you are powerful, that you have it inside of you. For those who have ears to hear, let them hear. That there is this something within you. And yet we say, oh, this was a terrible thing that happened to Jesus. He got crucified on the cross, and it was just awful. And I think about that time. You know, they crucified people all the time. Blasphemy. Jesus wasn't the only one who got crucified. I think he was having a bad day. They crucified people all the time, and it took 3 days. He was on the cross for 3 hours. Well, that's good. When he found himself up there, he got down. Something maybe we should learn. That there are times in our life when we may find ourselves crucified. We may be blamed for something we didn't do. We may be thrown out into the cold. That which we thought was solid may be gone, but don't stay there. Don't just stay there. Get down. Some people live on that cross all their lives. Oh. Nobody knows the cross I bear, the troubles I've seen, that which has been laid upon me. I am Job reincarnated. No, get down. Get down. I'll give you a little bit of interesting information. None of this is documented because none of the Bible got written for a really long time after it happened. But it's interesting that when the Roman soldier put the sword into Jesus' side, blood squirted out. Now, what I know about dead is that your heart's not pumping, so there is no squirt. Ooh, Barbara, that's gross. But think about it. What would it mean if he was taken back still alive, put in a tomb, maybe cared for a little bit, had a little water, a little something? Or maybe just the healing presence of the divine showing up as him was enough to heal his body and to bring him back into that state of health and wholeness, even after the things he had gone through. Just a little food for thought. There are entire books written about the idea that he never died, that he went back into the tomb, not doing too great, but still there. And that the resurrection was taken as an idea to deify this man as someone different than us. He said, look at my hands. Well, that's because he still had sores. There are books and historical writings of how Jesus moved to India. He had a big family. He had a wonderful life. How they have his grave. Just food for thought. Because when we take anything as the rock-solid truth, then we stop thinking. If Jesus was not the great exception, but the great example, then might we not think that our times that feel like we are being crucified will not end in our death, but will allow us to transform into something greater? Because I think it's naive to think that nothing bad is ever going to happen. People say, well, Barbara, with science of mind, all I have to do is know that I win the lottery and then I never have to worry again. And I'll never be sick and nobody will ever look at me cross-eyed and I'll never have to have any problems. It doesn't work that way. We all have what we call problems, but really they're just the natural growth process of who we are. We all have that, and to think we don't is naive. We're going to have issues. Don't be afraid. If you find yourself up on the cross, get down. You don't have to stay there. Nobody's making you stay there. But to do that, you have to be willing to let go. to let go of how you thought it was going to be, to let go of that who you thought you were, and to open up to something bigger. You have to let go of pettiness and smallness if you want to be big. You have to let go of the little story if you want to move into the big story. You have to stop being angry. You have to stop being afraid. You have to stop holding on to judgment if you want to move along the spiritual path and embrace that spiritual reality that you are. You are God in form. The eternal is forever begatting the only begotten, and he's begatting him in you and in me right now. There was not just one. There was an evolutionary process. And if you find yourself outside of the gates of Jerusalem, and you got a funny feeling that this is all going to change, don't be afraid. Because that which is within you is greater than any circumstance. If you find yourself on the cliff, don't be afraid. Jump. Jump. You'll either have something support you or you'll grow wings on the way down. Don't be afraid. But for God's sake, don't hide in the corner of this life and hold on to the way things used to be and then wonder why nothing changes. Don't be afraid. Oh, well, Barbara, in the Bible it says at the end, Jesus, hanging on the cross, looked up and said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? You know, that's a mistranslation. Keep in mind the traditional King James Version of the Bible has been translated well over 300 times. Take 300 people, put them in a circle and say the dog is blue, and find out what you come back with. Did you know that John and Barbara, blah, 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 blah? It'll be different. So there was a find in Egypt, the Nag Hammil find, where they found big earthenware jars buried in the sand. And in it were papyrus writings of the original Aramaic texts of the Bible before it went around 300 times. Now keep in mind, even these were written well after Jesus left. But they were the original Aramaic writings. Do you know that there are people in the world that still speak Aramaic? There are villages where people speak Aramaic. It's no big deal. So there was a scholar, a Bible scholar, who spoke both English and Aramaic named George Lamsa. And he devoted his life to retranslating the New Testament from those ancient scrolls. And he found some very interesting variations. One that I like particularly, all right. Oh, there, can you see them? Thank you so much. I wonder what else is down there. Lipsticks? One that I like is in the Lord's Prayer, where the traditional translation says, lead us not into temptation, like God is out there in this big thing, big Mr. Perpetrator, and he's going to lead us, come on, into temptation, and then slam dunk us into hell forever. The original text said, do not let us enter into. It said, watch our backs. If we're screwing up, you know, a little divine intervention would be appreciated. Do not let us enter into temptation. So in this one, the quote from the cross. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice and said, Eli, Eli, lamana sabachthani, my God, for this was I spared. This is my destiny. Nobody forsakes us, but we do grow. And when we grow, we have to be willing to let go of who we thought we were. When we grow, we have to be willing to let go of the little us and move into the big us. And some of us will do it with drama. Some of us will find ourselves in a very uncomfortable situation. And the only way down is to let go of how we thought it would be. To let go of our anger, of our fear, of our judgment, and of our smallness. And let go into the greatness of God showing up as us. We're on this world, on this earth path, to grow into the magnificent being of light and love that we were always meant to be. We are that Christ incarnate in each of us. Don't be afraid. This is your destiny, and so it is.